With Demon Souls and then Dark Souls, developer FromSoftware ushered in a new era of action RPGs. It took a whole generation, but eventually a plethora of copycats would appear down the line, and these days the market is swimming in Souls-likes. But maybe the most remarkable Souls clone is Nioh from Team Ninja. And they've been productive, pulling like 5 sequels and spin-offs out of their sleeves within 1.5 generations. In some ways, other developers should take note of this, but we'll get to that later. First and foremost, this video is supposed to counter some of the tribalism. The Souls games by FromSoftware are very highly regarded, rightfully so, many of them being masterpieces in game design. But because of that, I still remember many players scoffing at this idea that someone else would just take this formula for themselves. After all, in 2017, Nioh was the first big Souls competition that got mainstream attention, and inevitably there were many arguments about why one series is superior or inferior, which doesn't do either side justice. Because not only can both of these series be great, actually they're almost like the perfect complement to each other. Look, there's no doubt about who's the copycat in this instance. But it's funny, Nioh was pitched for the PS3 back in 2005, long before Souls even came out. Whatever the concept behind that original tech demo was, when the game was re-announced after more than 10 years of silence, that concept was discarded for something obviously inspired by playing Demons or Dark Souls, at least when it comes to gameplay. You've got your Estus flask, lock-on duels, you lose your experience points after dying twice, and so on. And looking at all the sequels, Team Ninja has been kind of cheeky about it too. Because after Sekiro by FromSoftware was all about parrying, a few years later you've got parry-heavy systems in Wo Long and the spin-off Stranger in Paradise. And a few years after Elden Ring turned the Souls genre into a very open sandbox, Nioh 3 did the same, even including that first super tough mini-boss right in the opening area. You see, despite popular belief, the Souls games aren't just action RPGs with tough boss fights. They take their post-apocalyptic nightmare backdrop seriously and are almost like survival games, or like a dungeon night simulator where players have to use problem-solving skills within these dangerous horror labyrinths by carefully investigating areas and using tools in creative ways, and where direct combat is only one of many elements. Now, in this aspect, Nioh falls behind. Even though the first Souls-likes by Team Ninja all had linear levels to choose from, they still tried to ape the labyrinth-like dungeon layout of Souls, including many doors locked from the other side, as you know it all too well from its inspiration. However, while some of these areas can be nice to look at and explore, progression and level design just never felt as meaningful and thought out as in Souls, especially because of its never-ending wave of random loot and lack of memorable secrets. Frankly, if these games were even more linear and even more tightly focused only on the encounters, it wouldn't have made a big difference, in my opinion. I also found that it didn't make sense stylistically that Nioh copied horror-like backdrops with ambient soundscapes. I assume the old Nioh was planned to be more pompous and in your face like other Team Ninja games, and it still is within the storytelling. It's so over the top, bright and goofy, and there are quirky spirit characters to explain why this Irish guy in the Middle Ages can communicate with Japanese people, and then in the second game there are cat clocks. Yet when you get into a level, all of a sudden you enter these drab, zombie-ridden areas which have an entirely different atmosphere. Here the developers were copying Souls maybe a little too much without thinking about their own vibes. Having said all that, the original Souls games never had the deepest action mechanics, because direct combat is only one part in its bigger survival dungeon crawling concept, as I said. But this is where something like Nioh could chime in and take its unique spot in the back then still fresh Souls-like genre. In the Team Ninja series, the challenge is all about mastering your samurai skills. Again, also almost like a night simulator, but much more focused on the battle scenarios rather than surviving the world overall. There are a plethora of different weapon types to customize, not only when it comes to stats, but also in gameplay style. Team Ninja took their expertise from Ninja Gaiden and gave each of these weapons satisfying combos to pull off. And they went even further by also making you be aware of your battle stance. With 3 different stances, which all change your heavy and light attacks, on top of different heavy and light combos for each stance, you get a ton of choices for the combat itself that many other games of this kind don't have. But that's not all. There also are many ninja tools and magic at your disposal too, and you'll have to learn other smaller mechanics, such as the ability to regain a small bit of stamina if you recover it fast enough. And then each sequel got its own little extra spins. As I've already mentioned, Strange in Paradise and Wo Long went further into blocking and parrying. Then Nioh 2 introduced a demon summoning system comparable to something like Castlevania Area of Sorrow if you've ever played that. Being able to use the trademark attacks of every single enemy, including bosses, is quite motivating and keeps up the pace even during lengthier sections. Then Rise of the Ronin put the concept into a Ubisoft style open world, which I personally didn't care for, but also made the characters a little more flexible, which was kind of continued in Nioh 3, where you could change between a samurai and a ninja mode on the fly. And besides that, the developers changed the open world style from a Ubisoft map with icon chasing into sandboxes akin to Zelda or Elden Ring. Which is also why I don't mind that so many of these games come out relatively quickly, as I've mentioned at the very beginning. In fact, during the same generation of Nioh 3 and Rise of the Ronin and Wo Long, other franchises fell into this trap where production values became so high that pretty normal sequels began to require development times of 4 to 7 years. I still remember when it was 2 years on average, and when 4 years was still considered a mind-numbing wait. And then, because they take so long, publishers also become wary of experimenting with an established formula. The Souls-likes by Team Ninja might not have the most mind-blowing production values. However, asset flipping and building on an established formula allows for a more consistent, yet at the same time also more varied franchise. And that's the end of my rambling for now. Feel free to leave your own hot takes regarding Souls-likes down below, and if you found any of it interesting, I'd appreciate if you liked or hyped the video. Either way, thanks for watching.